So, okay, so this particular problem was again one on experimental design, and they were focusing on control groups and the purpose of blocking, and also wanted to make sure that you could design a completely randomized experiment. So that was kind of the purpose of this. And actually, this one is actually in your note spiral, but it's a really good basic problem of understanding the idea of experimental design and the purpose of blocking and control, and a completely randomized design. So I thought it was a really good one to go back over. So let's talk about this. The question was 2007, question 2, and as dogs age, diminished joint and hip health may lead to joint pain and thus reduce a dog's activity level. Such a reduction in activity can lead to other health concerns such as weight gain and lethargy due to lack of exercise. Makes me think maybe I'm a dog. A study is to be conducted to see which of two dietary supplements, glucosamine or chondroitin, is more effective in promoting joint and hip health and reducing the onset of canine osteoarthritis. Researchers will randomly select a total of 300 dogs from 10 different large veterinarian practices around the country. All of the dogs are more than 6 years old, and their owners have given consent to participate in the study. Changes in joint and hip health will be evaluated after 6 months of treatment. All right, so basically they said, hey, we're selecting 300 dogs around the country, so hopefully that they're representative of dogs of age 6 and older who may be susceptible to hip and joint issues. So in this case, what would be an advantage to adding a control group in the design of the study? Whenever they ask me a question like this, I really like to show the reader I know something by kind of going over the definition. And the definition would be, hey, what's a control group? So I'm not going to say a control group is, I'm just going to kind of incorporate it. So adding a control group to the study would allow researchers to determine whether the changes being observed were due to the treatments or due to variables outside of the study. In this case, our treatments were medication, and you could say, hey, whether the changes in joint pain were due to the medication, and that would probably be a little bit better because it's actually more in context, and it's very, very important that all your responses be in context. And for instance, I need to give some reason why. Matter of fact, if I just said the initial statement as opposed to putting it into a little more information, they only gave me partial credit. For instance, as dogs age, it's reasonable to assume that their joints will deteriorate. Well, yeah, over time, we develop joint pains, even humans. By having a control group, a group that receives no medication, we will know whether or not the treatments retarded the deterioration. In addition, a control group would allow us to determine whether joint pain might be attributed to an uncontrolled variable, such as weather. For instance, joints are typically less painful during warm months. So we wouldn't know if the dog's joint pain responses were due to the weather or the treatments if there were no control group. Now, I did not need to be that wordy. I did not need to be that lengthy, but I needed to give some reasonable thing that would reason as to how a control group might have helped. In this case, I actually gave two. I actually said age and weather. I could have just chosen weather, said, hey, weather could affect joint health and joint pain, and a control group would let us know whether the changes we were seeing were due to weather or due to the medication. Or I could say due to age impacts joint pain. So a control group will let us know whether as they age we're watching joint deterioration or whether or not the treatments were having an impact. So once again, the purpose of the control group is to let you know whether or not the treatments or medication is having an impact. For the next part, it says, assuming a control group is added to the other two control groups in the study, explain how you would assign the 300 dogs to these three groups for a completely randomized design. So they specified the design. There's no blocking. They just want a randomized design. And whenever they say randomized design, I go, everyone's name in a hat, I mix, and I draw, okay? Because these are dogs, I'm going to go to one further step, and I'm going to assign them numbers, which is always a good thing to do, even with humans, or whatever subjects you have. So in this case, I'm going to assign all the dogs a unique number 1 to 300. I place all the numbers in a bin and mix thoroughly, and then I draw the numbers without replacement. Make sure you say whether you're going to do whether repeats are allowed or not. So this time I'm saying drawing the numbers without replacement. So I'll address that. That's an easy line to leave off. And the dogs associated with the first 100 numbers drawn would receive glucosamine. The dogs are assigned to, with the next 100 receive chondroitin. The remaining 100 dogs would be placed in the control group and receive a placebo. Okay, so that is how I would make the assignment of the treatments. And basically, please note, there are actually 3 treatments. There's the chondroitin, there's a glucosamine, and basically essentially a placebo group, which is acting as a control. Now, they didn't say they're giving a placebo, but generally speaking, we think of the control or the no treatment group as a treatment. One thing that I want to note here is this, it asked me how to assign the treatments. It didn't ask me how to run a randomized design. If it had asked me to actually run the whole thing, I would say after a certain number of months or years, I'd come back and I would check the dogs for, I'd compare joint pain for the dogs. Because I have not, in this case, it only asked for the assignment, so that's all I did. But had it been explain the entire experiment, I need to make sure that I need to compare the results at the end, and I need to make sure the problem's in context. Finally, Part C says, rather than using a completely randomized design, one group of researchers proposes blocking on clinics, and another group of researchers proposed blocking on breed of dog. How would you decide which one of these 2 variables to use as a blocking variable? Once again, whenever they ask me a question like this, I like to start off with a definitional response that's somewhat in context to let the grader know that, hey, I know something, so that they have a favorable impression of me. So the purpose of blocking is to create homogeneous experimental groups by controlling for a variable that would have the greatest impact on the study. If you wanted to make that short, and I probably would during a test, the purpose of blocking is to control for the variable that would have the greatest impact on a study. That's the purpose. I believe clinics across the nation would have similar treatments, and therefore I would not block by clinic. On the other hand, certain breeds of dogs are more susceptible to joint issues due to their size and genetics. Thus, I would block by breed. Why? It's really important, because I believe breed of dog would have a greater impact on the study than a clinic would. So once again, I basically restated we block based on the variable that will have the greatest impact. And because I believe breed of dog will have the greater impact, that is how I would, that is the question. That's how I would express myself there. All right, so I'm going to stop the recording.